What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at NerdTees, and welcome to week 6 of my weekly CFL football pick show for the 2021 CFL regular season and postseason. And our up and down trend kind of continues through what we've had most of the season, but at the very least, the floor seems to be rising a little bit. If you'll recall, the two bad weeks that I've had so far this season have both been 2-10s. So they've been tremendously bad weeks. This was obviously a bad week because I was under 500, but the level of bad has at least kind of risen a little bit. So it's bad, but it's a little bit better. I did go 3-1 straight up. So that is the one area this year that I've managed to raise up above 50% on the season. So 2 thumbs up on that one. 3-1 straight up, even money 2-2 against the spread, but missed all 4 of the totals last week. So going 0-4 over under, which is really not good. So it's a 5-7 week. It's 41.67%. It's underwater. We never like to be there, but it's not 2-10. On the season, I'm now 10-9 straight up, so that's up above 50%. Against the spread, still 3 games under at 8-11, and on the totals now an abysmal 6-13. That's only 32% on the year. So we're 24-33. That's 42.11%. Was right around where I was at the end of the week last week. We're also continuing the upward trajectory in CFL fantasy. I'm now inside the top 10 in the official Atlantic Schooners CFL Fantasy Football League. 10th place out of 82, 87.3 points in week 5, which I believe is my highest score of the season so far. So we're continuing to go in this direction, which is always good news. 393.2 points overall on the year. My MVP from week 5, definitely James Wilder Jr., running back for the Edmonton Elks, touched the ball 16 times, turned that into 81 all-purpose yards, added a receiving touchdown, was worth 18.1 points. Now, usually this is where I would give you my CFL fantasy roster for week 6. Unfortunately, it's not quite available yet because we played Monday games, like Labor Day games. The fantasy week just hasn't rolled over yet, so I haven't had a chance to actually do my roster. By the time you see this episode, I'm sure I will have that roster done, and I'm going to take it and probably pop it at the end of the episode. So please stay tuned. My CFL fantasy roster will be at the end of the show. Heading into week 6, the Montreal Alouettes are on the natural bye. We've got 3 rematches, obviously, from the games over Labor Day weekend, and then the week concludes with a new matchup of Ottawa in BC. So this time we've got Hamilton in Toronto taking on the Argos, we've got Saskatchewan in Winnipeg taking on the Bombers, and we've got Calgary in Edmonton taking on the Elks. Also, because it's so early in the week, there are really no reliable betting lines either on spreads or totals except at the CFL's official betting partner, which is BetRegal. So all of our lines this week, usually I would be using either Sports Interaction or Covers, but all of our lines this week are coming courtesy of BetRegal, so I thank them very much for having some lines up for me to talk about as I'm recording early Tuesday afternoon. So let's start in Toronto here, Ticats Argos, and you're going to find this episode's probably moving at a bit of a faster pace. Not only am I pressed for time, but we've got 3 rematches from last week, so it's at least a little bit less to talk about in terms of game context. Hamilton 2-2, Toronto 2-2, but these are 2 teams going in different directions. The Ticats have now won back-to-back games after a really terrible start to the season. Their offense has found it. Their defense has found it. They picked up the win last week against Toronto in Hamilton, 32-19. And yeah, safe to say that the Ticats, certainly on the offensive side, but I think on both sides of the ball, have definitely found that next gear, kind of like I talked about last week. Another quarterback change for Toronto. They go back to McLeod Bethel-Thompson. This is an exceptionally dangerous game that the Argos are deciding to play, and I think it's an awful one. I think it's really, really a bad decision. Which quarterback on this team can say, like, I'm the QB1? Or I'm even the QB1A? Which one of these quarterbacks can actually sit down and believe that they have the faith of their coaching staff? Because it's like the second something goes wrong, bring in the other guy. This is not like goaltending in the NHL. Yes, they're the 2 most important positions in their respective sports, quarterback and goaltender, but you rotate goaltenders a lot more than you rotate starting quarterbacks. For Hamilton, this was their 7th straight victory over Toronto on Labor Day. They've definitely set up a nice little streak there, and Hamilton has really just dominated the Labor Day matchup against Toronto. Historically, I think this might be their 36th win overall on Labor Day in this matchup. They score on the offensive side of the ball. They score on the defensive side of the ball. Shout out Simone Lawrence with the pick 6 that ended Nick Arbuckle's night. They even scored on special teams, a Frankie Williams punt return touchdown. So they scored on all levels in this game, did Hamilton, and I genuinely think this is just a team that's getting their mojo back. I certainly don't love the Ticats giving up 15 points in the fourth quarter. Now, luckily, the game was mostly out of reach, but aside from that, the defense was pretty darn spectacular. They sacked the quarterback 3 times. They knocked down 10 passes, which is absolutely tremendous, and they had 2 interceptions off of Argo's quarterbacks. The defense in general played very well. That 15 spot in the fourth quarter looks a little bad, but it's also misleading. There were good things if you were Toronto. This was a team that had 3 receivers that had 5 or more catches, 3 receivers that had 50 or more yards. They spread the ball around very well. They were pretty good on first down. They were just garbage on second down. So first down, 11.1 yards per play. That's good. That's great. That's chaining first downs on average. That's always good. But when they got into second down scenarios, 2 yards per play. I think it was 39 yards on 20 second downs or something along those lines. Not good enough. Never going to be good enough on second down. And I kind of touched on it a little bit. This is a team, as far as I'm concerned, they're in a full-blown identity crisis. And it's not just the quarterback position. Who's the starting running back on this team? Who's the number 1 wide receiver on this team? Because the receiver, I believe Ricky Collins, has the most receiving yards, but he's like 4th on the team in catches. So is this an offense that just has no identity whatsoever? You don't know who the starting quarterback is. You don't really know who the starting running back is. You don't really know who the top option is in the receiving game. So what are you? Ticats are still undefeated against the East Division now at 2-0 on the season, and in this spot, I just can't pick the team with the identity crisis even if they are at home. So we're going to take Hamilton for back-to-back weeks to hang another loss on the Argos. Ticats now scoring 30 points a game over their last couple of games after 14 points total in the first 2. So yes, this team offensively has been very peak and valley, but I get the feeling that they're going to be a lot closer to the 30-point-a-game team that we've seen over the last couple of weeks than the 14 points total that we saw at the beginning of the year. On the line, Hamilton favored by 3.5 points. I'm not the world's biggest fan of buying that extra point, but this would be an absolutely terrible hedge. And I made this mistake last week because I hedged on the Argos +4. That was one of my 2 against the spread misses last week. Of the 19 games that have been played, 10 of them have finished by a margin of 11 points or more. So if you're going to hedge here, I just don't get it. I wish I would have looked up that statistic going into the games last week. But it's just not a good hedge, and with the games tending to be not quite as competitive so far at the beginning of the year, bigger margins of victory, I can't take a plus play here on 3.5. We're going to lay the points on the Ticats. Total in the game set at 43.5. I like this to go over just the littlest bit. 3 of 4 games went over last week. So we're daring to dream that this over drought is, or the drought of overs is done, and we're going to start seeing some more points. I'm going to lean over on it. This is one of the closer numbers this week, but we're going to take the over on 43.5 points. Let's go Hamilton 24, Toronto 20, Ticats win, lay the 3.5 on Hamilton. We now come to the point of the show where I both wish I had a banjo and wish I knew how to play one. The Banjo Bowl, Winnipeg and Saskatchewan, this time in Winnipeg, with the Blue Bombers getting the best of the Roughriders last week at Mosaic Stadium to the tune of 23-8. Second straight win for Winnipeg, who moves to 4-1 on the season. Saski dropping their first game of the year. They sit at 3-1. Pretty lackluster offensive effort from the Roughriders last week, given that that was such a marquee game last week. Just 276 total yards of offense from them. They only possessed the ball for a little bit over 25 of 60 minutes, and they turned the ball over 5 times. You can't turn the ball over 5 times against a team like Winnipeg and expect to have the game be as competitive as it was. For Winnipeg, you could see a concerted effort for them offensively to dedicate to running the football. Both teams averaged about 5 yards per carry, but the difference in the carries was almost double. Winnipeg carried the ball 25 times, mostly Andrew Harris. Saskatchewan only carried the ball 13. You run the ball, you win time of possession, you control the game. And when you're two teams that are separated just by that much, control of the game makes all the difference in the world. Cody Fajardo throws 3 interceptions for Saskatchewan in that game. It did only lead to 10 points. The game was still in reach despite the fact that he threw those 3 interceptions, but you cannot give teams like Winnipeg that much of an edge. And Fajardo just, for the first time this season, I think, just really didn't have it. But he did have a heck of a connection and has all season long with Kyron Moore, a wide receiver who I gushed about 2 seasons ago in 2019 when I thought he was one of the best young wide receivers in the game, period. He had 10 catches for 79 yards in that game last week. That makes him the league leader in receptions. He's got 29, which is 2 more, I believe, than Kenny Lawler from Winnipeg. However, of all players who have only played 4 games, because Saskatchewan's only played 4 games, Kyron's got 7 more receptions than anybody else in the league. Kyron Moore has officially moved from one of the best young wide receivers in the game to one of the best wide receivers in the game, period. Just gonna give myself a little pat on the back there because I was on the Kyron Moore train maybe before almost anyone else. Neither quarterback lit the stat sheet on fire in that game. I think Kolaros had a touchdown, but also threw a pick. But it was backup quarterback Sean McGuire for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who accounted for 2 of Winnipeg's 3 touchdowns. A couple of very short yardage touchdown runs for McGuire. Just kind of cool to see the backup come in, kind of that Chris Strevler style, come in, score a couple of touchdowns, basically make yourself the difference in the football game. It was nice to see Winnipeg's pass rush finally start getting home a little bit. They had 3 sacks in that game. They've only got 9 on the season, so a third of their sacks came in this one game. And I got to shout out defensive back Dietrich Nichols. Sorry about that. 5 tackles in the game. He had a sack. He had an interception. He was effective all over the field. Had himself a heck of a game. The Banjo Bowl is just one of those games that never, ever, ever disappoints. And I think, honestly, despite what I kind of talked about previewing the game, I think I got to lean on the team that's going to be hungrier and angrier, and that's going to be Saskatchewan. Like, Saskatchewan is not the kind of team that's going to leave anything on the table to try to prevent somebody from beating them 2 weeks in a row. So I think I got to lean on the Roughriders here. I don't expect a repeat of what we saw last week. I'm going to take Saskatchewan in Winnipeg actually to upset the Bombers, and it is an upset against the spread, although earlier it was very, very close when I first looked at the lines late Monday night. But we're going to take Saskatchewan to upset Winnipeg. It's 100% a revenge play, which happens very often in this league. You'll see a team wins one week, they play again the next week, the other team winds up winning. So it is a revenge play, and the 2 teams are so similar. I just don't expect that poor of a repeat offensive performance, even though Winnipeg's defense is tremendous. On the line, Winnipeg is laying 2.5 points as a home favorite. Obviously, I like Saski to win. I'm happy to take the plus 2.5. Total in the game set at 38.5 points. And if there is a number this week that I really potentially would look at as an under, it would be this one, even though it's the smallest number of the week, just because of how good Winnipeg's defense is. But since I'm leaning on Saski to win, I think I got to take over on it just because the number is so bloody low at 38.5. It's so small. We're going to take over 38.5 points in Saski, Winnipeg. I'm just going a single point here. Saskatchewan 20, Winnipeg 19. Saski gets their win back. And I'll take this opportunity, as I always do at this point in the show, to shout out my great friends and sponsors at Nerd Tees. Ladies and gentlemen, nerdtees.ca is where you need to go to find dozens and dozens of incredible tea blends and accessories, everything that you would need for that special somebody in your life. Again, Christmas coming very, very soon. Nerdtees.ca. Hit my promo code BWFinest. That is going to save you 15% at checkout. It's also going to get you free shipping in Canada on any order over $100, which is an excellent deal as well. Today's blend is Lovely Kiwi-licious. A delicious blend, smells incredible, tastes incredible, and that is one of, as I said, dozens and dozens of options. Great options, no matter if you got a sweet tooth, you like fruit, it doesn't matter what type of tea you like, black teas, green teas, matcha teas, does not matter. nerdteas.ca has got you covered. Hit that promo code BWFinest, save your 15%, get your free shipping, find yourself something to love, or find someone you love something to love. You can do it at nerdteas.ca. Let's go to Edmonton now, where the Calgary Stampeders will take on the Edmonton Elks. Calgary now losers of 2 straight games, sitting at 1-4 to start the year. A brutal start to the year for the Stamps. Edmonton winning that game last week 32-20 on the back of a tremendous performance from Trevor Harris, who clearly got sick of me smack talking him because he completed 75% of his passes, threw for just a couple yards shy of 400 with 4 touchdowns and no picks. So Trevor, I'm sorry. Meanwhile, speaking of quarterbacks, Jake Maier, another day, another 300-plus yard performance, and the defense just kind of wasted it. It wasn't all on the defense. Like, whoever's calling the plays for Calgary directly, offensively, Kadeem Carey's on your team, right? Like, he touched the ball 7 times. Just insert everything I've ever said about James Wilder Jr. and just take out James Wilder Jr. and replace it with Kadeem Carey. How do you expect to win games when Kadeem Carey touches the ball 7 times? Now, he turned those 7 touches into 57 total yards and a rush touchdown. Maybe that guy should get the ball a little bit more. So they basically sacrificed any touches for Kadeem Carey in order to give them to the wide receiver trio of Kamar Jordan, Markeith Ambles, and Josh Huff. Now, those 3 combined for 24 catches, 269 yards, and a receiving touchdown. So they obviously, all 3 of them, had big games. But that also makes your offense tremendously one-dimensional because the defense knows you're not running the ball. You haven't run the ball all game. So they can pin their ears back and play pass defense. And play pass defense basically the entire game. If you're not going to make their job difficult for them, chances are they're probably going to beat you. I can understand if Calgary's kind of feeling the heat now to go back to Bo Levi Mitchell after starting the season 1-4. First of all, I don't think you want to screw around too much with the injury that Bo had. Don't put him back out there until he's 1,000% ready to go. But again, these losses are not on Jake Maier, and they're probably not even on the offense as a whole. The defense gave up 480 yards against. You're not going to win many games when that happens. They only knocked down 2 of Trevor Harris's 41 pass attempts. You would expect to see a little bit more there. They did not get to the quarterback. They did not generate any turnovers. The defense just hasn't shown enough to be capable of winning a game like that when your offense is also completely one-dimensional. Meanwhile, on Edmonton's sideline, this is the offense that I was expecting to see right from the start of the year. 30-plus points, Trevor Harris balling out, James Wilder being that dual threat guy that everybody knows that he is. He was involved running the ball and involved in the pass game. 7 receivers involved in the pass game, including 4 different touchdown recipients. This is the Edmonton Elks offense that I thought we'd see right out of the gate in week 1. And if they're kind of turning into that glass cannon, except the defense a little bit better than I thought it was going to be, Edmonton could make some noise here. Nothing has been decided yet. Now, you got to pump the brakes a little bit because Edmonton could have given that game away, given that they took 6 penalties for 106 yards just on the defense, part of 12 penalties and 161 overall. They came into that game as the least penalized team in the CFL. I have a hard time believing that that is still the case, but they could have punted that game, but they didn't. That's what matters. Here you have a really unique matchup. You have a team in Edmonton that is winless in their 2 home games, but have not lost yet against West Division opponents. And you have a Calgary team that lost their only road game and has not won yet against a West Division opponent. I think I got to stick with Edmonton here. They're the team that's certainly going in the right direction, whereas Calgary very much is not. So let's ride that wave. We're going to grab Edmonton here at home to get their first home win of the season. Edmonton beats Calgary. On the line, the Elks are only laying half a point as the home favorite. So it is literally the smallest margin that you can have in a game that's not a pick'em. So we're going to go ahead and lay the half point. And I don't think I have to explain that too much. Total in the game set at 40.5 points. This is a total that is far too low. This is at least a field goal too low, if not more. This is probably the last week that we're going to get totals like this, so let's try to exploit it as much as we possibly can. And again, I think this Elks offense has turned a corner. The Stamps defense is not good enough to hang with that. So we're going to go Edmonton 24, Calgary 20. I'm going to give Calgary at least some credit on the offensive side. Edmonton wins this game. The game goes over the point total and lay the meaningless half point. And the last game we're going to look at this week is the one game this week that is not a rematch because Montreal is on the bye, BC comes off the bye, they're at home to take on the Ottawa REDBLACKS. REDBLACKS now losers of 3 straight games after opening their season with a win, losing 51-29 last week against Montreal. That game was in Ottawa. Digging for positives after a 22-point loss can be kind of perilous, but hey, they proved they could score more than 20 points. Now, granted, 16 of their 29 points came in the fourth quarter with the game completely out of reach, and they were still outscored in that quarter, 17-16. There's just nothing is going right in Ottawa right now, but hey, at least they proved they are capable of scoring more than 20 points. But I gotta ask, Dominique Davis in at quarterback? We saw Double D come into this game, taking over for Matt Nichols. He generated 3 touchdowns. He certainly played about as well as I've ever seen Dominique Davis play a game of football. But really? Ottawa's run defense got absolutely obliterated in that game against Montreal to the tune of 183 rush yards against and a rush touchdown on 29 carries. They got pummeled and they had absolutely no answer for it. Well, I guess the slight answer was to take a bunch of penalties. They had 10 penalties for 134 penalty yards against. Just kind of another day at the office for the REDBLACKS. BC Lions come into this game off of the bye, even money at 2-2, winning their last time out, ironically enough, in Ottawa against this REDBLACKS team back in week 4, doubling them up 24-12. Mike Riley leading the way in that game, completing 72% of his passes, throwing for 301 yards, threw a touchdown, did not throw a pick, added 20 yards and a rush touchdown on 3 carries. Mike Riley was all over the place. Riley spread the ball around very well in that game, had 5 or more catches, not just from Brian Burnham and Lucky Whitehead, but also from Javon Kotoy. He had 5 catches, 93 yards, had Mike Riley's receiving touchdown. That was his first touches of the season and just his second touchdown in the CFL, so shout out to him, arguably his best game as a pro. The Lions defense forced 4 turnovers from the REDBLACKS in that game back in week 4. In fact, winning the turnover battle 4-0. So they were also very careful with the football, which is also a good thing to be against anybody, no matter what the other team is. And I got to take a second to shout out another person on the Lions team, and it's the kicker position. And in terms of this show and players that get shouted out, it's not often the kicker that's the one that gets shouted out. I'm going to shout out Jimmy Camacho, who is the field goal kicker for the BC Lions. He was 3 for 3 on his field goals in that game back in week 4. He is the only kicker in the CFL who has not missed a field goal yet this year. We've seen a lot of field goal kicks missed, and Camacho did miss an extra point, I believe, earlier in the season, but he's 6 for 6 so far this year on his field goals, the only kicker left in the league that has not missed one of those, so I wanted to take a second and say congrats to him. I can take the time to do that because it's an Ottawa REDBLACKS game. Let's stay in reality here. They got the worst offense in the league. They got the worst defense in the league. This is not happening as far as I'm concerned. So we're going to be very heavy on the BC Lions in this game. Lions at home beat Ottawa, go to 3-2, and the Lions are still a competitor here in the West Division. At this point, as far as I'm concerned, I don't care who's playing quarterback for Ottawa if the answer is not Caleb Evans. This is the drum that I am going to beat all season long until we see it. Caleb Evans should get a shot for the REDBLACKS, and I would expect and hope to see it at some point in the next couple of weeks. On the line, the Lions are laying 6.5 points as a home favorite. I'm also going to be laying those points. Again, we talked about that 2021 trend of something like 58% of the games ending by 11 points or more. So I have no problem at all laying these points. The Red Blacks are bad, so we're going to lay the 6.5 points on the favored Lions. Total in the game set at 41.5 points, and you know what? I'm just going for it. I'm going for a sweep on the overs. We're going to go over this point total as well. Hopefully that leads to more realistic point totals next week, because right now these are in the basement and just completely unbelievable. So I'm going for all 4 overs. We're going to go over 41.5 points in BC Ottawa. Let's go Lions 27, Red Blacks 16. There you go, folks. Those are the picks for week 6 in the CFL. Let's go over them here with you one more time. I've got Hamilton in Toronto beating the Argos. I'm laying 3.5 points on the favored Ticats in a game that goes over 43.5 points. I have Saskatchewan upsetting Winnipeg in Winnipeg, getting their win back from last week. I'm taking the 2.5 points with Saskatchewan in a game that goes over 38.5 points, the smallest total of the week. I like the Edmonton Elks to get their first home win of the season. I was about to say in Calgary, but they were in Calgary last week. Edmonton to get their first home win of the season, beating the Stampeders for the second straight week. I'm laying the comical half point on the favored Elks in a game that goes over 40.5 points. And I like the BC Lions at home to get the win over the Ottawa REDBLACKS. I'm laying 6.5 points on the favored Lions in a game that goes over 41.5 points. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at NerdTees. And once again, pay attention to the end of this video, which is coming momentarily. That is where you'll see my fantasy roster for this week, because I was not able to make it prior to recording the episode. Enjoy the games in week 6. We will see you again in week 7. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, just yesterday, I posted my NFL week 1 picks. Hop on over there, take a look at them too. We'll see you next week.